Seems we were kicked out.
Everybody back?
Yeah, but I don't see us connected to the Zoom meeting.
Maybe
maybe he was somehow disconnected.
Yes, that's true. Exactly. Somehow the computer just shut off on me. I don't know why. Okay. I hope it will stay on from now on. Okay.
So you can't eat all tonight. I'm going to eat this cucumber. I'm going to say a bracha al tonight, like it counts as part of my motzi sudah.
No. You can't connect the cucumber. Wait, I haven't explained yet what does connect and what doesn't connect. So it goes like this. If there's a type of food or drink that if you have it during the meal, even during a bread meal, you would still need to say a first bracha over it, like or for example, wine or grape juice. Everyone who drinks wine and grape juice within a bread meal, about a weekday meal, in a bread meal, has to say Beracha Agafen. Wine or grape juice always deserve their own bracha, even within a bread meal. So, on all of these types of foods and beverages.
But not on Shabbos.
Oh, that's the point now I'm getting to. If you had any of those foods or drinks before you washed for the bread meal, let's say you had an orange, you ate an orange before you washed for the bread meal, and now you're also going to have some of the orange as a dessert during the meal, or not necessarily the orange. It can be an apple. Anything that deserves a borei priya etz, to say over it, even though you're within a bread meal. So you're having a pomegranate, any fruit that deserves its own borei priya etz during that meal. But you've said already borei priya etz over the orange that you had eaten before washing. So the borei priya etz you said before the meal serves as a first bracha over the fruit you're going to have during the meal. So that connects the orange you had before the meal to the meal. It's not just conditioning in your mind, I want this to be part of the meal. It has to have a halachic connection to the meal. If it has an halachic connection because it serves as the first bracha that you're meant to say over the food you're going to eat during the meal, now it serves the fruit you had before the meal. Its bracha serves as the bracha for what you're going to have during the meal. That makes it connected to the meal. And then the Birkas Hamazon does cover the orange you had before the meal because of the halachic connection that it has to the meal. And same is true for wine or grape juice. If you had revis of wine, which normally deserves bracha achrona before the meal, before you wash for a motzi, and then you're going to have wine during the meal, and that wine during the meal should have deserved its own bracha borei priya agafen. But since you had said borei priya agafen over the wine that you had before the meal, therefore the Birkas Hamazon covers the wine you had before. This is even on a weekday, not talking about Kiddush, but in a weekday.
Before a meal is intending to drink it during the meal.
Fine. So, but you have to actually drink it. Intention is not enough. You have to actually drink some wine during the meal in order for the wine before the meal to be connected to the meal in order to serve. So Birkas Hamazon should serve as a bracha achrona over the wine you had before the meal.
He's drinking is throughout the meal, beforehand and during.
Fine, perfect. So then that solves the issue. Then you don't need to say a separate talagefen priya gefen over the wine you had before the meal. That's perfect.
Do you have that in mind?
No. As long as you actually do it.
Before you'd wash, you'd have to decide, because if you're going to do the
right, you wouldn't have said
if you're going to do the after bracha, you would
decide
say that before.
Right.
So I'll tell you what happens then. You don't have to decide, because let's say you finish the entire meal and you didn't have any wine during the meal, or you didn't have any fruit after you had eaten that fruit before the meal. You did not have any of it during the meal. Then you say borei nefashos, even within the bread meal. And I'll tell you further than that. Let's say you already benched. You benched already. You said Birkas Hamazon, and you hadn't had a fruit or wine or a borei priya ha'adama food that would require borei priya ha'adama during the meal. You didn't have any of those during the meal. You benched your Birkas Hamazon. You still need to say borei nefashos or ala gefen priya gefen over the food or drink that you had before the meal. The Beracha Hamazon doesn't count for you. Because we don't have anything connecting you to the meal with what you had before the meal. So you're missing out on a bracha achrona over what you had before the meal. It's like you haven't said a bracha achrona on that yet. So you need to say it after Beracha Hamazon even.
Last night when I said Havdalah, 10 minutes later I started to wash. And I have a hamotzi. If I don't drink any wine during that meal, when I finish benching, I should say Allah get.
Exactly.
But if I took a sip of wine during my hamotzi, no, then it's okay. Then I'm okay.
Exactly. Perfectly, exactly. That's exact halach. Now, going back to our cucumber. So let's say you had a cucumber before the meal, right? So you say Bari Priya Dama. Now, a cucumber never needs a separate bracha during a bread meal, ha'adama. So it doesn't serve anything. The Bari Priya Dama from before the meal doesn't serve anything for the meal. It doesn't help you in any way, halachic way, during the meal not to have to say a bracha rishona. So the cucumber deserves its own broi nefashos. You have to say broi nefashos. It won't be connected to the meal.
You do that after Birkat Hamazon?
No, best to do it, preferable to do it before you even wash. But if you didn't, then you can do it during the meal. And if you didn't do it during the meal, it's after benching, do it after benching. Yes.
How can you do it during the meal when you're eating a salad at the same time?
Doesn't matter.
No kasher to the cucumber?
No kasher. Because it doesn't have a halachic connection. Even though you're eating a cucumber, you can eat a whole cucumber during the meal. It doesn't connect it to the cucumber you had before the meal. You still need to say broi nefashos even while you're eating that cucumber.
What's the difference between the halacha?
Because the broi priya dama that you said before over that doesn't help you in any way during the meal because you don't need to say broi priya dama for salad.
If you save this much of the cucumber, you save a bite of the cucumber for during the meal, then you'd be okay.
No.
Because you wouldn't have said an independent.
Only Allah connection connects it, not the actual cucumber. Not even the actual cucumber doesn't connect you to the meal. It's like you're having a cucumber. You had a cucumber separate from the meal, even if you just had half of it, and then the other half you ate during the meal. That doesn't connect that half to that half. What connects you is the bracha. Only halachic connection connects you, and not right because the bread covers all that. Right. What's that?
In other words, as far as seems to be the opposite.
Why?
I'm asking you. In other words, the bracha comes out of it as of intentions. Right? How normal people eat. That's what hilchos brachos are based on.
Meaning,
brachos aren't based on a separate halachic category aside for the food. Hilchos brachos are created as a result of eating habits.
Okay, so what is that? How does that explain why is it connected to the meal?
Saying that there's no connection, there's no halachic connection. A halachic connection is based on the eating habit connection. And if you're going to eat it during the meal also, as normal people might do, especially when you say it over, what is the basis of saying it? There's there's a separate halachic connection aside from eating. When the brachos are about eating.
Because the fact that you're eating another half of the cucumber during the meal doesn't help you say that the Beracha Hamazon can cover what you ate before you wash. Because washing is what the Beracha Hamazon covers washing. As you wash, Beracha Hamazon is like the closure of washing. You wash, you eat bread, it's a Beracha Hamazon. It's Hilchos Brachos.
It's like what we have the idea of always people eat, right? And then, or for instance, on Shavuos.
Yeah.
You know, I think about what do we say? What was the origin of the way people did it twice? They did say or they washed again between milk and meat. But you know, with
no, they couldn't have washed again. There would be Rosh Hashanah Tzricha. They could have eaten a dairy meal, and then within that dairy meal, they also started eating fleshings, and then they had as if two breads, but they didn't have to wash again and say motzi again. It's all one meal.
Why does it make sense that Beracha Hamazon covers everything from when I started eating, including in the middle when I washed?
Because washing is is the beginning of what makes it necessary to bench, because bread makes it necessary to bench, not a cucumber. So as you start the bread meal, that's when you have the chiyuv of benching. That's what instigates. That's what starts up.
You have to bench by malay kreiso, even without washing, right? I mean,
No, not for cucumbers. Even if you had only mizonos. True. Oh, okay. So that's excellent point. Excellent point Yaki is saying here. Mizonos has its own category. That's why I didn't bring an example before of mizonos before the meal. If you have a piece of cake before the meal and then wash, so you would not need to say alamichya. You would not need to say alamichya. Washing would cover the cake as well. How come? Even though if you had cake during the meal, even as a dessert, you would not need to say Berman and mizonos within a bread meal.
That's the one blessing you do not have to say. The mizonos is the one blessing you do not
Correct,
have to say.
even as a dessert. Right, correct.
It's too similar to, right? It connects to the bread.
It connects to the bread. It's like bread. It's too similar to bread, exactly. Only if it has three categories to it. A piece of cake that has three categories to it, then you say its own separate mizonos. It won't go into it. It's called pata baba kisnin. It's complicated, but it's barely any cake fits those three categories. So almost never do we say Barim and mizonos within a bread meal over cake that we eat as a dessert. So now it should have been that if you ate a piece of cake before the meal, you should have to say alamichya, because it's not helping you in any way, halachically, not to have to say the first bracha during the meal. We said that's the only connecting. But as Yanki said right now, cake per se is like bread. Cake, if you eat enough cake on its own, without bread, without anything, you would need to wash, say a motzi, and brikas hamazon. For any type of cake, not just the cake that falls under that category of pata baba kisni. Any cake you eat, if you have enough of it, it's 320 grams of cake, which is a lot. People don't sit down and eat so much cake. But if you, for some reason, decide you want to finish half a cake your wife prepared in one sitting, you want to compliment her how delicious it is. So you're showing her how it's delicious. So, yeah. So just you have to diet afterwards for quite a while to get that off. So if you do that, then you have to wash, say hamotzi, and brikas hamazon. Over a certain amount of cake, it becomes like bread. Livriyut. So since cake is so similar to bread, so we consider it as part of the bread meal, even if you start eating it before. It's like having bread after bread, two tasting breads, one after the other, as if. It's so similar that the brikas hamazon does cover all cake that you ate before the meal, even if you didn't have the amount that would require washing. You didn't have that amount, you just had one piece of cake. Still, it's so similar to bread that it's considered part of brikas hamazon. What's that? We don't.
I'm sure in America, only that, not chocolate.
So it's wrong.
Okay.
I'm sitting here wondering.
That's wrong.
All the big posts in America. That's the minute from the post in America.
It's weird. Shahakol's like not every shahakol you would say. If you drink something, you wouldn't say a separate shahakol. But if you have ice cream, you say a separate shahakol for your dessert. That's something that doesn't come with the filler.
We were brought up by based on the post.
I have no idea. I have no idea. That's from what I know. That's against the simple halacha that I learned. Anyway, I don't know. To ask the poskim there, Shachter maybe. Ask him Shachter what
if you Shabbat morning, so you decide to have a Kiddush, wine and cake.
Okay.
And then you're going to have a bread meal, say a half hour later. And you're going to drink wine during that meal.
Right.
Not then have to say an after bracha on the wine and cake.
Exactly.
You can just save everything then.
So brikas hamazon. Exactly.
What's the time limit between?
So the time limit to make it connected.
72?
No, not 72. Maximum is an hour. Maximum it's an hour. But the post can say that even try to do it within half an hour to have it really definitely connect to Birkas Hamazon. That shows that it's like one session of eating. Because half an hour doesn't show that you're distracted yourself from eating. You're still within that same seating. Between half an hour to an hour, I've seen different opinions. Beyond an hour is definitely a new seating. Definitely something separate. And then you have to make sure to say the Beracha Achrona over what you ate and drank before.
Also, what if you're in different places? Often, you may daven early, finish, go to somebody for Kidush, and then you're going home for your meal.
Then definitely say your Beracha Achrona in that place, definitely. Because that's not a continuation. Yeah.
In other words, in a typical situation where you're in shul, and you make Kiddush, and you have a desires, you have filled the mitzvah of Kiddush Makom Seudah. Even though it's not technically a Seudah, a Kazayas,
correct.
It's considered Seudah.
Correct.
So technically, when you come back home, if your wife has done the same thing, you do not have to make a new Kiddush before you Seudah.
Exactly.
Is that
correct?
Or should you repeat, or is it?
So that's where we're getting to. That after all this introduction, that's where we're getting to. And that's our question exactly. Our question is, should you or not? So,
I know Moshe was in favor.
In favor?
Yeah, sure.
Right. So I'll tell you why. The only reason I can think of to make Kiddush twice in the morning, even after you and your wife are Yotze Kiddush. Not talking about a case when you have a family member who hadn't heard Kiddush yet, or then no brainer. Then you have to make Kiddush on its own, and that no problem. But we're talking about a case when everyone has fulfilled the mitzvah of Kiddush already, and now we're just starting the meal. So there is one opinion of the Gra, the Gaon of Vilna, who holds that one is not Yotze. You're not Yotze Kiddush unless it's connected to a bread meal. It doesn't work for you as Kiddush if you eat just mizonos and that's it. And you say Al Michya and Al Gef and you finished your Kiddush. Doesn't work. So according to the Gra, you would have to make the Kiddush connected to the bread meal. So why not make sure that you fulfill the mitzvah properly by making another Kiddush before the meal? That's the reason to be in favor of making another Kiddush, to be Yotze the Gra. Otherwise, it could be all your lifetime not making Kiddush, morning Kiddush. Although that means if you want to be Yotze the Gra, it means that you're not considering the first Kiddush as real. According to the Gra, it wasn't a real Kiddush. And then it turns out that you ate before Kiddush.
I'm almost positive. I learned about Moshe.
Yeah.
There's two ways of learning that.
Yeah.
Even according to the Gra, you're not mekayim the mitzvah of you need hamotzi for the Kiddush.
Right.
The Kiddush that you eat in the mezuzah, that was also okay. According to the Gra, the first way you learn is according to the Gra, you made a sin by doing that.
Right. Because you ate before Kiddush.
Moshe looks different.
So how does he work it out?
I'm almost positive he works it out by saying you're able to and Kiddush Ela b'makom Suda.
Right.
So if you want to have mazonos before you're able to be Mekayim, you can do that with saying
Bar Pragafen.
Kiddush.
Yeah.
But for your real Suda, whatever,
yeah.
you should do it again.
Still do it again, like the Gra himself would say that. Would agree to that?
The that I know with Moshe, he makes it a differentiation.
So
the Rav is teaching us, I asked the building, he said, yeah, you sinned. That's a bracha levatala, and you did the wrong thing.
Yeah, no, bracha levatala can never be because he said when he said bar pragaf. Okay. So and he drank the wine. You sinned by eating and drinking before Kiddush. Right. Right.
And I don't think the building.
That's how I understood that.
I think it's more like this is the proper way of doing it. But
not that it's a sin to go do it that way. Could be. Okay. But in any case, the idea is to fulfill the Gra's opinion as well as everyone else's. That's the idea in general.
I think there's another way to get out of that problem.
Yes.
And that is Rav Soloveitchik, as I understand it, holds that every meal, and he used to do even for Sudash Lishit.
That's the Rambam, right?
Right, to make it a meal of Yom of Shabbat. So therefore, when you're making Kiddush again at lunchtime, it's because you want to. It's not because you need to say Kiddush. It's because you want to turn that meal into a Shabbat meal. That's how you officially declare
by drinking wine in it.
Yeah.
Okay. Excellent. But if it's that reason, then Rav Shlomo Zalman's question is even more powerful. And I'll tell you why. Comes Rav Shlomo Zalman and asks the following question. He says, he even asks the question further than what we just said now, that if everyone had made their own Kiddush already, and we're Yotzei, now you want to make another Kiddush for anyone, for any reason you want to say, he says, okay, fine, you want to say B'rei Pergafen again with Shamru and Zachar, no problem. There's no Bracha Batala, and you're even following the Gra, and everything's perfect. But I forgot to say one thing before. I need to say one more introduction. By Kiddush, every Kiddush, Friday night or Shabbos morning, we drink the wine before we wash, right? And let's say a person will not have any wine during the meal. He's not planning on having any wine during the meal. And no grape juice. Nothing that requires B'rei Pergafen during the meal. Would he need to say a bracha achrona over the Kiddush? Because we said before, the only connecting point between what you ate before the meal and what you're going to have after, except for mizonos, is the fact that that the bracha, you said before, serves as a halachic significance for during the meal. But here it doesn't have any halachic significance because you're not going to have wine or grape juice during the meal.
You said earlier, yes. You said it, you already told us that. You said, yes, you need to make it. You're not going to have any wine during the meal.
So that's for a weekday. During the week, when you're having wine or grape juice before the meal, and you're not planning on having during the meal, or you finish the meal without having wine or grape juice, you need to say ala gefen. But Kiddush is different. Kiddush, you don't need this connecting point of halachic connection because of the bracha. It's serving you it serves you something during the meal. Kiddush, by definition, is part of the meal because you can't start eating without Kiddush. So Kiddush is the only exception to the rule we said to begin with, that even if you're not planning on having wine or grape juice during the meal, you finish the whole meal without having wine or grape juice, the fact that Kiddush has to be said before the meal in order to start eating the meal means that it's connected to the meal. And that's enough that Birkas Hamazon is able to cover the Kiddush, the wine you had before the meal. That's another exception to understand. Now let's go back to the situation we're talking about. Yeah, the morning Kiddush. And now you've made Kiddush already before, and you're Yotzei Kiddush. Now you're making Kiddush again. Now, Shlomo Zalman even discusses a situation where one of your family members hasn't heard Kiddush. They haven't heard Kiddush. And you're the one to make. If they themselves, which is preferable that they make the Kiddush, then there's no question. Then it's a no-brainer. Then there's no need for bracha achrona, because for them, this is like the Friday night Kiddush, that it's connected to the meal because they have to say it before they start the meal. But if let's say someone else, like the father, says it instead of the son or daughter or wife who hasn't heard Kiddush yet, the father did make Kiddush already. Now he's repeating Kiddush over again in order to be motzi someone else. That's the case of Shlomo Zalman talks about. He says, but for the father, he's now saying B'rei Pergafen, drinking wine, unnecessary for himself. He doesn't need that to start the meal. He's made Kiddush already. Now it's back to the cucumber. We're back to a case where the wine that he's drinking is not significant serving for anything that for his needs begins the meal. So it says of Shlomo Zalman exactly that. If the father making Kiddush for others will not drink during the meal some wine or grape juice, he will have to say ala gefen or priya gefen over the wine he had drunken before the meal because there's no connection to the meal.
Don't finish your Kiddush cup.
Yeah, and make sure to finish it during the meal, not later on. Right. Solves that totally. But many people don't know this. Many people think that same as Friday night, when you make Kiddush, you don't need to drink during the meal, and it's connected. They think the same is true for the morning Kiddush when they had made Kiddush already before, and they're just doing it for others. And I would say, Kol Sheken and Kol Kal V'chomer, if everyone had heard Kiddush already before the table, and the only reason you're doing it now is for the Gra, so definitely you need to say ala gefen, priya gefen if you don't drink during the meal. I mean, definitely make sure to drink during the meal, otherwise you have to say ala gefen, priya gefen.
Yeah, this is
And what if you hold like Rav Soloveitchik?
Okay,
What's that? Drink during the meal, no problem, right?
And what if you hold like Rav Soloveitchik? Then it's not. Then it is necessary.
Oh,
Even
now
if
it comes Rav Soloveitchik. Okay, so I'll add that to that as well, and that makes it even more questionable, because it's not Rav Soloveitchik, by the way. It's the Rambam. The Rambam holds that every single Shabbos meal, including Sudah Shlishit, has to be over wine. That's the Rambam's opinion, that if we don't have wine for every single one of the Shabbos meals, it's not considered a Shabbos meal. It's still like a weekday meal. Wine makes it important. Not for sure, not as a halacha simple, but maybe yesh omrim. Could be a yesh omrim in the Shulchan Aruch. I don't remember right now. Shlomo Zalman writes that one should try to fulfill that obligation according to Rambam. Yes. Oh, and now that you said it, you expressed it perfectly. During the third meal, meaning, since we're not talking about Kiddush, we're talking about the importance of the meal grows, strengthens when you have wine. It's a more important meal that way. And the Rambam says every Shabbos meal, you have to make it important by drinking wine. So that wine, that type of wine, for that reason, is wine that you drink during the meal. And that's how they explain the Rambam. He didn't mean for Sudah Shlishis that you had to drink wine before the meal. So if you're only based... What's that? Has not been Kabbalah? Yeah, I know. Most Sudah Shlishit, I know. Even in shuls, right? Even in shuls, they don't have that. Right. I agree. Well, Soloveitchik likes basing his halacha on the Rambam. That's famous for the Soloveitchik dynasty. The Rambam is the most powerful posik for them. A lot of things are based on the Rambam. But I'm saying, based on that Rambam, it would be totally enough to have wine during the meal. So then, if you're having the wine before the meal, I understand Danny's point. I understand your point, Danny, that true, you could have had it during, and then the fact you had it before may still now require bracha achrona, but you're saying no, there's an halachic significance for the wine to serve as something for the meal.
Exactly.
Halachically for the meal. Now, so my point and my thinking was that since you could have had it during the meal, for that reason, you could have it during the meal. If you've had it before the meal, you've ruined it for yourself because it's disconnected from the meal. But you're saying no, it's the same difference. Whether you have it right before or during, it makes that meal important, and that's what the Rambam requires. So it is connected to the meal. Okay, that's a good point. So according to the Rambam, that could be good enough. But Shlomo Zalman definitely doesn't consider the Rambam, like we all said here in the Beis Medrash, that no one follows this Rambam anyhow. If you were a type of person that would make sure to have every Sudah Shlishit wine, then you can consider the second meal Kiddush prior to the second meal as that type of wine of the Rambam. But if you don't follow the Rambam Sudah Shlishit, you can't just hook onto the Rambam for the second meal and say, I'm doing it according to the Rambam. It's only if you're consistent with your belief in the Rambam in this case. Okay, so this is a very new idea to me, and therefore it's not so simple to tell people, even though you've made Kiddush before way before, you make Kiddush in the morning, just do it over again for the Gra, for the Moshe. It's not so simple, because now they're entering a situation of maybe possibly having to say bracha achrona over the wine, unless they drink wine during the meal as well. So it's something to be aware. I'm not saying that that's a reason not to do so. We're saying to be aware of when you do so. Be aware he's drinking wine during the meal as well. Okay, so we will not continue today the book, but it was an important discussion. I'll just say one last tiny short halacha that also came new to me last week. Learning chavrusa with someone, we fell upon a bir halacha in Taf Kaf Vav Siv Dalet. It's in the halachos of Kiddush HaChodesh. Yeah, Kiddush HaChodesh. Taf Kaf Vav Siv Dalet. The Bir Halacha there says, how come we end off Kiddush HaChodesh with Aleinu? Why do we add Aleinu to Kiddush HaChodesh? What's the connection? You said Kiddush HaChodesh, you finished everything, now you say Aleinu? It seems to be unrelated. So the famous answer given by the Beracha, and everyone quotes him, is that...
Wait, you mean Kidush Levana?
Kidush Levana, yes, sorry. Kidush Levana, sorry. Yes, I say by mistake Kidush HaChodesh. Yeah, Kidush Levana, right. By Kidush Levana, we say to doors...
No, you mean...
What's that?
Not Kidush HaChodesh. You say...
Yeah. The Shabbos... No, this is Birkas HaChodesh. That's Birkas HaChodesh. Kiddush HaChodesh is only when we had witnesses. So the Beit Din would do Kiddush HaChodesh. They would sanctify the new month by witnesses. That's Kidush HaChodesh. Kiddush Levana. So we did Kiddush Levana, and at the very end we had Aleinu. What's Aleinu doing there? So the Bir Halacha explains very beautifully. It's a Emunah passage in the Bir Halacha, not so halachic. It's Emunah based. He says like this: since we just seemingly looked like we were praying to the moon, you're saying all these things to the moon. How great you are, how far you are, how much light you shed upon the world. So it may seem as if we're worshiping the moon.
It makes it very clear.
Right. Aleinu leshabeach la'adon hakol, latech gdula liotzer bereshit. Shu noteh shemayim v'yosed haaretz. He is the one we're worshiping. It's just one of his creations that he created the moon that we enjoy, that we benefit from. That's what Aleinu is there for. Make sure we emphasize who we really believe in. But then the Bir Halacha in the end finishes by saying, and that's why we end off by saying, just forgot. That's how the Bir Halacha ends his comment there. That's why we end off by saying Hashem is the only one from heaven to earth. Wait, that's how we finish Aleinu? We have another half a section. We have a Kenek Avelecha. Where did that disappear to? Says from Chaim Kanievsky, this is called in the Dirshu edition of the Mishnah Berurah. There's an edition that came out in recent years that they quote a lot of current poskim on top of the Mishnah Berurah. It's called Dirshu. It's a very good edition of the Mishnah Berurah to use. So they quote from Chaim Kanievsky that he says, true. I never knew this. It's good for me to shorten my anyway delayed Kidush Levana. He says you don't need to say more than that in Kidush Levana.
That's only Kidush Levana.
Yeah, of course. Only Kidush Levana. Right. You stop there because it's not the real Aleinu that we're saying at the end of each davening. It's just to make sure we're understanding the fact and believing in the fact that Hashem is the king of all, not a moon cult. So, Einod is enough. We've expressed our belief in Hashem that He is the control of all. You know, to say Kenek Avelecha. So, Bli Neder, as of Kiddush HaChodesh of Shvat this year, I'll be refraining from saying the other half only because I'm any relate. So just to make it shorter
for myself. For everybody else.
Yeah, no, it won't happen with me. I'm still, right. I'm still the same, but it's a very good.
One mistake. One mistake that people do make is they face the moon when they start to say the bracha because you're supposed to see it. But then if the moon is not facing Yerushalayim, you shouldn't keep, then it really looks like you're davening to the moon. You're supposed to turn your body. Correct direction.
Also turn the body. Sometimes it turns out that the moon is in the same angle as Yerushalayim, and then you can't.
Yeah, this time it happened to be now.
Yes, I remember. It could be.
Yeah, it was
right.
East anyway. Yeah.
Right. But you're right. All you have to be facing Yerushalayim, no matter if the moon is in the opposite direction. You just look at it for a second to make sure it's shining clearly and they're not behind clouds or anything. And then you start the bracha facing Yerushalayim and with your legs closed like Shmoneh Esrei. That's how you're supposed to say the first bracha only. Baruch atah Hashem, mechadesh chodashim. Kadesh Chodesh.
With your legs closed?
The legs closed. That's the bracha, yes. The rest, and all the rest you can just walk around. But the bracha itself has to be with your legs closed and facing Yerushalayim, no matter where the moon is. That proves that, and showing that if we're already talking about that mistake, then you just mentioned, Shlomo Zalman adds another point. We're not supposed to say, even though it's written in all Sidurim and in all pamphlets that they hand out for Kidush Levana, we're not supposed to say Kishem Shani Oked Kenegdech Veini Chol Lingua Bach Kach Lechlu Kol Levai. That sounds like you're really speaking to the moon. So he says, don't say it that way. Kishem Shani Oked Kenegdah Veini Chol Lingua Bach Kach Lechlu Kol Levai. Not direct speech, indirect. You're speaking to Hashem. You're saying to Hashem, same as I cannot touch the moon, that's how Hashem make it that my enemies won't touch me either. What are you saying to the moon for?
That's like how some don't say all the Shalom Aleichem. That's a whole different shear.
Yeah. Or they say it differently a little bit. Yeah, right. That's a whole different concept, but it has to do with what Danny just mentioned. To try to show that we're not praying to the moon. So one is, don't direct your face towards the moon unless it's in the same direction as Yerushalayim, so you can help it, but always turn to Yerushalayim. And B, don't say kinegdech vebach, say kinegdah vebach about the Levana. Levana is nekeva, is a feminine word. So kinegdah uvah, and then you're not praying to the moon, rather to Hashem about the moon. That's how it is. Yeah. I got with that line, right? Okay, shkoyach. And it is Shavua Tov. Everyone.
Shavua Tov.
Shavua Tov. Bye bye.